Operation in Syria, 2011, present. In the blood-soaked battlefields of Syria, where a brutal civil war has ravaged the nation since 2011, Iran has played a decisive and often unseen role in ensuring the survival of Bashar al-Assad's regime. At the heart of this effort has been the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, which transformed the Syrian conflict into a proving ground for its asymmetric warfare capabilities and a critical front in Iran's strategy to reshape the Middle East. For the IRGC, the Syrian war was not just about defending an ally. It was about safeguarding Iran's influence in the Levant, securing a corridor to Hezbollah in Lebanon, and establishing a permanent foothold on Israel's doorstep. The IRGC's intervention in Syria began in earnest in 2011, as protests against Assad's authoritarian rule spiraled into an armed rebellion. Assad, Tehran's most reliable Arab ally, was on the brink of collapse, and the IRGC was determined not to let that happen. Losing Syria would have dealt a devastating blow to Iran's regional ambitions and severed its vital land bridge to Hezbollah in Lebanon, undermining Iran's strategic depth. The IRGC's elite Quds force, led by the infamous General Qasem Soleimani, was tasked with turning the tide of the war in Assad's favor. Initially, the IRGC's role was limited to providing intelligence, logistical support, and training for Syrian security forces. But as the conflict intensified and Assad's grip on power weakened, Iran escalated its involvement. The IRGC began deploying its own operatives to Syria, embedding them within Syrian military units and offering real-time battlefield guidance. Quds Force advisors worked closely with Syrian commanders to develop counterinsurgency strategies, turning Assad's battered army into a more effective fighting force. But the IRGC's most significant contribution was its ability to mobilize a vast network of Shia militias from across the region to fight in Syria. Recognizing that Assad's army was overstretched and demoralized, the IRGC turned to its loyal proxies, Hezbollah from Lebanon, the Fatemiyun division from Afghanistan, and the Zainabiyun brigade from Pakistan. Thousands of Shia fighters, indoctrinated with Iran's revolutionary ideology and trained in asymmetric warfare, poured into Syria to bolster Assad's forces. Hezbollah's involvement in Syria was particularly pivotal. Under the guidance of the IRGC, Hezbollah fighters played a key role in recapturing strategic territories, including the city of Qusair in 2013, a critical supply route for the Syrian opposition. Hezbollah's battlefield expertise, combined with the IRGC's tactical planning, proved instrumental in shifting the momentum of the war in Assad's favor. By 2015, Iran's intervention had become so deeply entrenched that it was impossible to distinguish between Syrian and Iranian forces on the ground. As the war dragged on, the IRGC expanded its operations beyond the battlefield. Iranian engineers and advisors helped establish a vast network of military bases, weapons depots, and command centers across Syria, creating a forward operating base that extended Iran's reach all the way to Israel's northern border. The IRGC's presence in Syria was not just about defending Assad, it was about entrenching Iran's influence in the region and positioning itself as a dominant player in post-war Syria. Iran's investment in Syria was not confined to military operations. The IRGC also poured billions of dollars into propping up Assad's economy, providing financial aid, oil, and other resources to keep the Syrian government afloat. Iranian companies, many with ties to the IRGC, secured lucrative reconstruction contracts, ensuring that Iran's influence would extend beyond the battlefield and into Syria's economic future. But the IRGC's ambitions in Syria went beyond securing a friendly regime. Iran sought to create a Shia crescent that stretched from Tehran to Beirut, encompassing Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Syria was the linchpin of this strategy, providing Iran with a critical land corridor that facilitated the transfer of weapons, fighters, and supplies to Hezbollah. The IRGC's vision was to establish a permanent presence in Syria, that would allow it to project power throughout the region and threaten Israel's northern front. The IRGC's role in Syria also had a profound impact on the dynamics of the conflict. By injecting thousands of Shia fighters into a predominantly Sunni rebellion, Iran exacerbated sectarian tensions and deepened the divide between Sunni and Shia communities. The presence of Iranian-backed militias fueled resentment among Syria's Sunni population, turning the conflict into a proxy war between Iran and its Sunni rivals, particularly Saudi Arabia and Turkey. The IRGC's heavy-handed tactics and sectarian policies also contributed to the radicalization of opposition forces, creating a breeding ground for extremist groups like ISIS and al-Nusra Front. Iran's support for Assad's brutal suppression of Sunni communities further alienated moderate opposition groups and pushed many Syrians into the arms of jihadist factions. The IRGC's actions in Syria were not just about preserving Assad's regime. They were about reshaping the sectarian and political landscape of the region to serve Iran's long-term interests. By 2015, the situation had reached a critical juncture. Despite Iran's extensive support, Assad's forces were losing ground to rebel factions and jihadist groups. Faced with the possibility of Assad's collapse, Iran called in reinforcements. Qasem Soleimani personally traveled to Moscow to persuade Russian President Vladimir Putin to intervene militarily. The resulting Russian air campaign, combined with Iran's ground forces and militia network, turned the tide of the war, allowing Assad to reclaim much of the territory he had lost. The IRGC's involvement in Syria came at a high cost. Thousands of Iranian operatives and proxy fighters were killed in the conflict, and Iran's economic resources were stretched thin. But for the IRGC, the price was worth paying. Iran had succeeded in preserving Assad's regime, maintaining its land corridor to Hezbollah, and securing a permanent military presence in Syria. The IRGC's vision of a Shia axis stretching from Tehran to the Mediterranean had become a reality. Today, Iran's grip on Syria remains firm, with the IRGC entrenched in key strategic locations and Iranian-backed militias maintaining a powerful presence across the country. The IRGC's influence extends beyond the military realm, with Iranian institutions and companies playing a dominant role in Syria's reconstruction and economy. For Iran, Syria is not just an ally. It is a forward operating base that allows Tehran to project power across the Levant and directly threaten its adversaries. But Iran's success in Syria has come at a price. Its military entrenchment has provoked frequent Israeli airstrikes aimed at preventing Iran from establishing a permanent military foothold near Israel's borders. The IRGC's ambitions in Syria have also heightened tensions with the United States, which has sought to contain Iran's influence through economic sanctions and military deterrence. For the IRGC, however, the cost of its intervention in Syria is a small price to pay for the strategic gains it has achieved. The IRGC has not only preserved a critical ally in Assad, but also transformed Syria into a launchpad for its broader ambitions in the Middle East. In the eyes of the IRGC, the Syrian war was not just a battle for Assad's survival, it was a battle for Iran's dominance in the region, and by all accounts, Iran has emerged as the ultimate victor.